Have you ever noticed how the people who seem most magnetic are the ones who reveal the least? They don't chase. They don't explain. They don't justify their every move to make others comfortable. They simply hold back. And suddenly, everyone wants more. The energy shifts. People lean in, start questioning, become obsessed with understanding what they can't quite grasp. Now imagine if you stopped giving everything away so freely. If you held back your thoughts, your time, your presence, just enough to create space. What do you think would happen? That's where the point lies. When you stop revealing everything, when you become selectively unavailable, the world around you transforms. People who took you for granted suddenly notice your absence. Those who ignored you start paying attention. And the ones who thought they had you figured out realize they know nothing about you at all. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago, and it's still the most powerful psychological principle most people never learn. You have been taught that honesty means total transparency, that authenticity requires showing everyone everything, that if you're not an open book, you're somehow being dishonest or manipulative. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. Complete availability breeds contempt. Total transparency makes you predictable, and everything that is predictable loses its power. Do you know why? Because human psychology is built on mystery and desire. And desire, real desire, doesn't grow in certainty. It grows in distance. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you. What does this mean? It means people create stories about what they cannot fully access. And those stories, those projections, often make you far more interesting than your complete truth ever could. Think about it. When was the last time you obsessed over someone who told you everything? Who was always available, always explaining, always giving you full access to their thoughts and feelings? You didn't. You couldn't. Because there was nothing left to wonder about, nothing left to chase, nothing left to discover. But that person who remained slightly out of reach, the one whose thoughts you couldn't quite predict, the one who sometimes withdrew without explanation, they lived rent-free in your mind. This isn't manipulation, by the way. Despite what Machiavelli's reputation might suggest, this is about something deeper. Carl Jung would call this maintaining your numinosity, that quality of mystery and depth that makes a person genuinely fascinating. When you reveal everything, you flatten yourself. You become two-dimensional. But when you hold back, when you create conscious distance, you allow others to encounter the fullness of who you are, gradually, on terms that preserve your power. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain yourself, the more you justify your choices, the more you make yourself available to scrutiny, the less people respect you. Not because they're bad people, but because this is how human psychology works. We value what we have to work for. We dismiss what comes too easily. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that power isn't taken, it's given away by those who don't know how to hold back. But why does this work? What is the psychological mechanism that makes restraint so magnetic? The answer lies in what psychologists call psychological reactance and what Machiavelli simply understood as human nature. When something becomes less available, our desire for it increases. Not because the thing itself has changed, but because scarcity triggers our survival instincts. We fear missing out. We need to possess what others cannot. Sigmund Freud spoke about the reality principle, the understanding that we cannot have everything we want immediately. And it's precisely this limitation that creates desire. An infant screams when it wants something and expects immediate satisfaction. But a mature psyche understands that delay, that distance, that slight unavailability actually intensifies the eventual satisfaction. This is not game playing. This is psychological maturity. Machiavelli observed that the vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. Harsh, perhaps, but look around. How many people chase after what glitters while ignoring what has depth? How many pursue the mysterious stranger while taking the loyal friend for granted? How many become obsessed with the person who barely texts back while ignoring the one who's always there? This isn't about people being shallow, though some are. It's about attention economics. We live in a world of infinite options and limited attention, and our brains, designed for survival, have learned to prioritize what seems scarce, valuable, or potentially fleeting. When you make yourself completely available, you signal abundance. And abundant things, psychologically speaking, don't get prioritized. Carl Jung understood this through the lens of projection. When someone doesn't reveal everything, we fill in the gaps with our own fantasies, our own idealized versions of who they might be. We project onto them what we wish to see. And ironically, by revealing less, you allow people to create a version of you that's far more appealing than your complete, messy, complicated truth could ever be. Is this dishonest? No. It's allowing people the space to meet you without forcing your entire psychology onto them at once. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where most people trap themselves. You think that if you just explain yourself enough, if you just make people understand your intentions, your history, your reasons, they'll finally see your value. So you over-explain, you justify, you defend. You make yourself so available that you become a book everyone's already read, and then you wonder why no one wants to read it again. The truth is darker than you want to admit. Most of your need to explain, most of your compulsive availability isn't about helping others understand you. It's about your desperate need to be understood, to be validated, to be approved of. And people can smell this desperation. It repels them, not because they're cruel, but because neediness triggers the same psychological mechanism that scarcity does, except in reverse. What's desperately available isn't valuable. What's confidently withheld becomes priceless. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But fear isn't the point here. The point is that respect, real respect, comes from maintaining boundaries, from holding back enough of yourself that people understand you are not theirs to consume. You are not a resource to be depleted. You are not an open wound seeking validation through explanation. You are a mystery worth encountering slowly, carefully, on your terms. And when you stop explaining yourself, something miraculous happens. People start filling the silence with their own curiosity. They start chasing answers you never promised to give. They start valuing your presence because your absence taught them what it feels like to want something they can't immediately have. So how do you do this? How do you become someone who holds back without becoming cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable in an unhealthy way? Because there's a crucial difference between strategic restraint and emotional withdrawal. One is empowering, the other is just trauma in disguise. But before we dive into the practical steps, let's talk about what happens in your nervous system when you decide to change this pattern. Because understanding the biology behind the psychology makes all the difference. When you've been conditioned to be constantly available, your body has adapted to that pattern. Your stress response gets triggered when you don't respond immediately. You feel physical anxiety when you set a boundary. Your heart races when you leave someone on read. This isn't weakness. This is your nervous system being loyal to old programming. Machiavelli lived in a time of constant political danger. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and you could lose everything. So he learned something critical. Emotional regulation's the foundation of strategic thinking. You cannot hold back effectively if you're internally collapsing every time you do it. The external restraint must be matched by internal calm. Otherwise, you're just white-knuckling through discomfort, and that's not sustainable. Here's what most people miss. The goal isn't to become unavailable. The goal is to become selectively available from a place of genuine choice rather than compulsive reaction. There's a massive difference. One is strategic sovereignty. The other is just another form of being controlled, this time by your fear of being controlled. You see the irony? Some people swing so far in the opposite direction that they become rigidly unavailable, cutting people off at the first sign of need, building walls so high nobody can reach them. That's not power. That's protection masquerading as power. And Machiavelli would see right through it. First, understand this. Holding back isn't about playing games. It's not about timing your text responses or pretending you're busier than you are. That's amateur manipulation, and people see through it. Real restraint comes from genuine self-sufficiency. It comes from actually having a life rich enough that you don't need to give yourself away to feel valuable. Machiavelli didn't advise princes to seem powerful. He advised them to be powerful, and power comes from internal abundance, not external performance. Start here. Stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. Notice how often you justify your choices, your feelings, your decisions. Sorry, I took so long to respond. I can't make it because the reason I feel this way is. Stop. Most of the time, people aren't asking for an explanation. You're volunteering it because you're afraid of being misunderstood. But here's the thing. Being misunderstood is fine. In fact, being misunderstood is often better than being completely understood, because complete understanding kills mystery, and without mystery, there's no magnetism. Jung spoke about the importance of the unlived life, the parts of ourselves we haven't yet revealed, the potential that remains untapped. When you reveal everything immediately, you leave no unlived life. You become fully known, fully mapped, fully consumed. But when you hold back, when you keep certain thoughts, certain feelings, certain parts of yourself private, you maintain depth, you remain three-dimensional. You become someone worth returning to because there's always more to discover. Second, become comfortable with silence. Not the awkward silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the powerful silence of someone who chooses their words carefully. Machiavelli understood that never was anything great achieved without danger. And the danger here is being misunderstood, being called cold, being accused of changing. But this discomfort is the price of transformation. When you stop filling every silence with words, with explanations, with reassurances, people start to respect the weight of what you do say. Practice this. In conversations, pause. Let silence exist. Don't rush to respond to provocations. Don't defend yourself against every criticism. Don't explain your absence when you return. Just be, and watch how this shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, people start qualifying themselves to you. They start wondering what you're thinking. They start working to capture your attention instead of assuming they already have it. Third, protect your energy ruthlessly. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your time, your emotional depth. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who gets your time? Who gets your presence? And more importantly, who are you giving these things to out of guilt, fear, or habit, rather than genuine choice? Start saying no without apology. I'm not available. That doesn't work for me. I'm choosing to spend my time differently. No justification, no guilt, just boundaries. And yes, people will react. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll try to guilt you back into your old pattern of constant availability. Why? Because your restraint threatens the dynamic where they had easy access to you. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their adjustment to your boundaries is their work, not yours. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires you to disappoint people. It requires you to stop performing the role others need you to play, and the people who truly value you will adjust. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll appreciate the quality of the limited time they get with you, but those who only valued you for your availability, they'll leave. And that's not a loss, that's a filtering. Fourth, cultivate genuine mystery by actually having depth. This is critical. You can't fake this part. The most magnetic people aren't magnetic because they're playing games. They're magnetic because they're genuinely interesting. They read, they think. They have inner lives rich enough that they don't need constant external validation. They pursue their own projects, their own growth, their own evolution. And this authentic depth, this real substance, creates natural mystery. People sense there's more to discover because there actually is. And here's something Machiavelli understood that modern psychology confirms. People respect what they cannot fully predict. Not chaos. That just creates anxiety, but measured unpredictability. Strategic variation. Sometimes you're warm, sometimes you're distant. Not as manipulation, but as an authentic reflection of your internal state. Sometimes you're generous with your time, sometimes you're protective of it. Not according to some game plan, but according to your genuine needs and boundaries in that moment. This creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of behavioral conditioning that exists. It's why gambling is addictive. It's why toxic relationships hook people. But it's also why genuinely complex people remain endlessly fascinating. You cannot predict them completely because they're not performing a role. They're living authentically, which means they're responding to life moment by moment, not following a script. But, and this is crucial, you must do this from abundance, not scarcity. When you withhold from scarcity, from fear, from insecurity, people sense it. They smell the neediness underneath the performance. But when you withhold from abundance, from genuine self-sufficiency, from a life so full that you simply don't have space for everyone, that's when it becomes magnetic. That's when people recognize they're in the presence of someone who has something real to protect. Machiavelli studied power, not because he loved power for its own sake, but because he understood that in a world full of manipulation, knowing the rules of the game is how you avoid becoming a pawn. And the greatest rule is this: what you withhold becomes more valuable than what you reveal. Your absence becomes more powerful than your presence. Your silence becomes louder than your words. But here's the most important part. This transformation isn't about making people chase you. That's a side effect. The real transformation is internal. It's about valuing yourself enough to stop giving yourself away. It's about respecting your own depth enough to protect it. It's about understanding that you are not here to be consumed, understood, or figured out by everyone who shows the slightest interest. You're here to live your life on your terms, sharing yourself selectively with those who earn it. And when you do this, when you truly embody this principle, something shifts. You stop seeking validation because you're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You stop explaining because you no longer need others to approve of your choices. You stop being constantly available because you finally understand that your presence is a gift, not an obligation. And that's when everything changes. That's when people start chasing you, not because you're playing games, but because you've become genuinely rare. And rarity in a world of constant availability is the ultimate power. When you finally learn to hold back, something profound happens. First comes the discomfort. People react. They test your boundaries. They try to provoke you back into your old patterns. But you remain steady. You remain selectively available. You remain mysterious not as a performance, but as a natural expression of your self-respect. And then comes clarity. You see who was really with you and who was just using your availability. You see which relationships were built on genuine connection and which were built on convenience. Some people fall away, and you let them. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. They weren't your people. They were just passing through a version of you that no longer exists. In that space where there was once anxiety about being liked, confidence enters. Where there was once neediness for validation, self-sufficiency enters. Where there was once the exhaustion of constant availability, peace enters. The peace of someone who knows their worth. The peace of someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The peace of someone who has become, as Jung would say, individuated, whole within themselves. Machiavelli wrote his truths 500 years ago, but human nature hasn't changed. We still chase what withdraws. We still value what's scarce. We still become obsessed with mysteries we cannot solve. And when you understand this, when you embody this, you stop being the chaser and become the chase. Not because you're manipulating anyone, but because you've finally learned to value yourself enough to stop giving yourself away. Today, we learned from Niccolò Machiavelli that power flows to those who understand restraint, and from Carl Jung that wholeness requires protecting our psychological boundaries. The paradox is beautiful. By revealing less, you become more. By holding back, you draw others in. By becoming selectively unavailable, you become infinitely more valuable. This isn't about becoming cold or playing games. It's about respecting yourself enough to stop being consumed by everyone who shows interest. It's about understanding that mystery isn't deception, it's depth. And depth, real depth, cannot be revealed all at once. It must be discovered slowly, earned gradually, respected always. If this message resonated with you, if it sparked something you've been feeling but couldn't articulate, hit that like button and share this wisdom with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to join our community of thinkers who are brave enough to question what they've been taught and bold enough to transform how they show up in the world. Are you ready to hold back, to protect your mystery, to become selectively unavailable? Write in the comments, "I choose my power." Let's see how many are ready for this shift. Until we meet again, remember, what you withhold becomes your strength. Carry that forward. May you find our talks not only educational, but also inspirational, and hopefully, ultimately, transformational. See you next time.